Beneath the streets of Paris, there are 6 million people, not buried, not resting in peace, stacked. Their bones line the walls of over 300 kilometers of underground tunnels. Femurs arranged in neat rows, skulls placed at regular intervals, tibias and vertebrae packed together like bricks. 6 million human beings, organized into decoration, and the Catholic Church put them there, not as a punishment, not as an act of disrespect, as a solution to a problem the Church had created, and could no longer contain. The city above them has no idea they are there. The tourists who walk above them every day have no idea whose bones are beneath their feet. By the 1780s, Paris was drowning in its dead. The city's cemeteries had been filling for centuries. The largest of them, the Saints Innocents Cemetery near the market of Les Halles, had been in use for over 10 centuries. It held the remains of an estimated 2 million people in a space barely larger than a city block. 2 million people. In one city block, the soil was saturated. Decomposing bodies contaminated the groundwater. Residents of nearby streets reported that their wine turned sour in the cellar, that their food rotted faster than it should, that the air in their homes smelled of death, that their children were falling ill. In the spring of 1780, the cellar walls of houses adjacent to the Saints Innocents Cemetery collapsed. The pressure of the accumulated dead had literally pushed through into the living. Doctors warned the city council. The cemetery was a public health catastrophe. The Church had run the Saints Innocents Cemetery for 1,000 years. It was sacred ground, consecrated, the burial site of countless generations of Parisian Catholics, who had been promised that their remains would rest in this earth until the resurrection. The Church made this promise to every person baptized in Paris, to every family who paid for a burial plot, to every priest who stood over a grave and said the words of committal. The Church did not want to move them, but in 1786, it had no choice. The solution was the quarries beneath Paris for centuries. Workers had been extracting the limestone that built the city above. Notre Dame was built from this stone. The Louvre was built from this stone. The walls of Paris themselves came from the earth beneath them. By the 18th century, the quarry tunnels stretched for hundreds of kilometers under the streets. Vast, dark, abandoned passages that served no purpose after the stone was taken. The city decided to use them. Over the following decades, the bones of 6 million Parisians were transferred from the overcrowded cemeteries into the tunnels below. Workers carried the remains down in carts and baskets. Night after night, thousands of bones at a time. Priests walked in procession beside them, blessing the transfer as the carts moved through the streets. Some nights, the processions lasted until dawn. The transfer was treated, officially, as a sacred act, a dignified relocation of the dead to a new resting place. But look at what actually happened. The bones were not reburied. They were not placed in individual graves or marked with individual names. They were arranged, sorted by type, stacked against the tunnel walls in patterns that someone had decided were aesthetically appropriate. The femurs were placed in rows. The skulls were positioned at regular intervals to break up the monotony. Decorative patterns were created. Crosses made of skulls. Hearts outlined in FEMURS. Someone made aesthetic decisions about how to display 6 million people. And this is where the story becomes stranger. In 1793, the French Revolution arrived in the catacombs. The revolution that guillotined. The king also guillotined thousands of others, aristocrats, priests, nuns, anyone the revolutionary tribunals decided was an enemy of the new republic. During the Reign of Terror alone, over 16,000 people were officially executed. Many thousands more died in prisons. Their bodies needed to go. Somewhere. They went to the catacombs, the executed enemies of the revolution were placed alongside the bones of the Catholic faithful who had been moved there just years before. The people the church had buried in consecrated ground now shared their resting place with the people who had been killed by those who wanted to destroy the church. Priests who had been guillotined for refusing to renounce their faith lay beside the bones of the revolutionaries who had ordered their deaths. The guillotined and the baptized together in the same tunnels. In the same decorative arrangements. Whether anyone considered the theological implications of this, whether anyone asked whether Catholic bones could share space with the bodies of men who had died attacking the faith, no record survives of that conversation. Now consider who is actually down there. 6 million people. That number is so large it resists comprehension. Think of it this way: the entire population of a major city, every man, woman, and child, gone and placed in tunnels beneath the ground. Every one of those 6 million was a specific person. They had a name, a family, a life that mattered to someone. They had been baptized in the church. They had taken communion. They had confessed their sins and received absolution. The church promised them rest in consecrated ground until the resurrection. That promise was made when they were baptized, when their families paid for burial, when priests stood over their graves and committed their bodies to the care of God. The promise was not kept. Their bones were moved, sorted, stacked, arranged into patterns for the aesthetic pleasure of whoever decided how the catacombs should look, and most of them have no name attached to their remains anymore. The transfer from the cemeteries to the tunnels did not preserve individual identities. The bones were moved in bulk, mixed together. A femur from one person placed next to a skull from another. The individuals dissolved into the collective. 6 million people, and most of them are anonymous. The church that buried them knew their names. The church that moved them lost them and has never officially acknowledged that this happened. 6 million names gone. The bones remain. The names do not. Today, the catacombs of Paris are one of the most visited tourist attractions in France. Nearly 500,000 people descend into the tunnels every year. They walk through the bone-lined passages. They photograph the skull arrangements. They read the inscriptions placed at intervals by the men who organized the tunnels in the 18th century. Some of them smile for the camera. Some of them look serious. Some of them do not seem to fully understand what they are standing in front of. One of those inscriptions reads, "Stop. This is the empire of death." Another reads, "Happy is he who always has the hour of his death before his eyes." These were written by the Inspector General of Quarries, a man named Louis-Étienne Héricart de Thury, who oversaw the organization of the catacombs in the early 19th century. He was not a monk. He was a civil servant. He chose the inscriptions he thought were appropriate for the space. A government official decided what the dead should say to the living. And the church, which had promised these people rest in consecrated ground, accepted it. The catacombs are still open. The bones are still arranged. The tourists still come. They take photographs. They share them. They move on. And 6 million people who were promised that God would remember their names are waiting in the dark beneath Paris for a resurrection that the city above them has largely stopped believing in. The inscriptions are still on the walls. The bones are still in their arrangements. And the question of whether what was done to 6 million Catholics in the name of public health and civic order was an act of practical necessity, or a betrayal of the most fundamental promise the Church ever made, has never been officially answered. The empire of death is still down. It is still waiting, and it is still asking the question that no one in Paris has wanted to answer for 250 years.